CEO Wisdom Pod edition. So, like talking about podcasting, it's what I dedicate more than 60% of my life to nowadays. We have Jeff Large with us. He is the CEO and the founder of Come Alive Creative. It's a podcast agency. It's a bit more complex than that, and we're going to talk about this today: podcasting, everything in between. Jeff, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about CAC?
Yeah. So, all right. We don't normally acronym it, so that's funny. Um, or at least pronounce it as a single word. Yeah. My
Yeah.
name's Jeff Large. Short is I've worked in audio for about 25 years ish as a musician and different things. I've been podcasting since 2012. We've been producing them for other people since about 2016. I run a team of about it kind of fluxes a little bit, but usually around the 10 or 12 mark. And we're doing full service. So typically working with businesses most of the time in the B2B space, but we're starting to venture out into some other shows. I started a field recording show recently just to kind of try something new for the heck of it. And yeah, we kind of all levels for more straightforward interview style stuff to kind of more full production narrative, custom music, all that. So we run the gamut.
Love it. Why go into entrepreneurship is my first question.
For me personally, yeah. So I think I'm formally trained as a teacher. I am just shy of my master's degree. I used to teach middle school language arts, so kind of reading, writing, and then kicked over to a couple years of technology pre-K through 8, which was wild, trying to teach little children how to use a computer. But I got to a point, practically speaking, that I've always loved teaching, but we had some pretty massive admin changes that started to spark me wanting to leave because we just no longer, the admin changed, like our principal and whatnot changed, and the direction and their vision for the school and the kids changed compared to what I felt was best for them. And so I started to feel conflict there. And I've always been interested in the business side, but there was a big desire for me to just, I think at its most practical level, make more money being more present to my actual family. And then there's other elements that kind of grew out of that that were to do something meaningful, to do something that I cared about, to have more flexibility within my own life. So I'd say those are some of the high level reasons. And then it just continued to evolve. And you still, I will caveat that you still run into your own issues. So you still have new types of problems. The grass is not always greener on the other side, but for me personally, this lifestyle fits me best. It gives me what I need for what I hope for. And it's been a pretty good mix.
Right. So, were you teaching in Grand Rapids back in the days?
I was. We had about I'm based out of Michigan, and so I'm in the Midwest here. And the school I was at primarily wasn't inner city, but it leaned pretty pretty urban in general. It was a charter school district. We had, for people who understand school speak, it was like 90% of the kids were on free reduced lunch, that type of a thing. And so um, I loved it. It was like I was very much in my element with the kids. It was, like I said, just unfortunate that it sort of took the shifts that it did from a direction standpoint.
Yeah, pretty rough neighborhood. Is it like accurate to say that Grand Rapids is known for its crimes? I mean, Michigan is not the same as it used to, at least Detroit and Grand Rapids pretty near. So, how was the demographics and how did you deal with that?
Oh yeah, I don't want to oversell that. I don't think Grand Rapids is quote unquote bad at all, whatsoever. There's crime, and we may have seen an uptick in it, I would say, over the last several years. But I don't have the official stats in front of me. I would say it's at a pace that's somewhat comparable, kind of as a whole. But of the cities in Michigan, Grand Rapids is one of my favorite. Detroit definitely has a different feel to it, but I'm no expert on it either, so I'm not going to sit here and kind of speak authoritatively. But there's certainly areas that are worse and more difficult, in cities that are worse and more difficult, and then I think just even from the news standpoint, get a worse rap. But Michigan in general, happy with it as a state, and then Grand Rapids has been a good city. And if anything, I think I would err on the side of moving further out of the city. Like you have some people that really love city life and some people that don't. I like it less every year. And we're kind of in the middle ground right now of our current actual location, but working in it and living in it for me are two different things, if that makes sense.
Right. I'm in Mexico and I've been, in many different neighborhoods, poor, rich, and so forth, and never really been affected by anything because I work remotely and, it's pretty peaceful in this room. Let's call it that way. For the podcast agency, you went from teacher to this. So, like, what was the transition there? Was it rough? Was it easygoing? And how was it to supplement yourself with uh your own business revenue vs being paid a salary?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely different. I think the biggest kicks from the American standpoint was the loss of healthcare. That was wild because you'd have to figure out how to do it yourself when you're self-employed. The fast take on this one for me was some people will talk about how they have this side hustle and then their side hustle goes and it outpaces their primary income and they're like, and then I quit. I at the time was working doing I was doing web development. That's how we started. So basically 2014 to 2016 was web development was what Come Alive was focused on. And we had one gig that was paying us like $15 an hour or something that really wasn't very good when I quit. And we had enough savings. My wife and I talked about it for about a 6 month runway. We're like, all right, worst case scenario, we spend all our money and I go back to teaching. We're like, all right, we're both comfortable with that. Let's try it. And so we went for it. Unfortunately, we didn't have to. We did have, for me again, to be fully transparent, we had about one-ish time that we basically burned through everything that we had and we're like, okay. And I started applying for teaching positions again. This was like maybe 2-ish years into it or something, or a year and a half into it. And then all of a sudden, as soon as I kind of personally let go of like really wanting this to be my thing, we just had a ton of work start to come in. It was almost like an answer in that regard, which was kind of wild. And so things have gone up and down since then. But it's all been stable, like as a whole, like it's been stable enough. And you kind of learn to roll with it as a business owner, as you could probably know. Like there'll be times where you're living in excess, and there'll be times where you're like, no, I got to tighten the belt a little bit, or kind of get practical or prudent about what I'm doing, and make sure that I'm investing in the right things. But I think stuff you just learn with time. So
Ebbs and flows. What about podcasting? Have you seen it grow in the last couple of years? A lot of people say it's saturated.
yeah, I think saturated is the misleading word. You probably have seen some of those things when you compare it to something like Google, or not Google, when you compare it to like YouTube or radio or these other platforms. It's like if you're going to talk about saturation, podcasting's not anywhere remotely close to that. But then you also have other interesting facts where like 70% of podcasts fail and like all these things. And so there's so many numbers that we could kick around and argue with one another, where I will say from what I've witnessed of the space, yes, there are more podcasts than there used to be. Yes, I think podcast listening habits have changed. We've got pretty decent evidence of that, of where, say, several years ago, you might find a show that you really like, and then you just stay committed to it indefinitely. Where now, because there are more choices, and we still have the same amount of time that we did 5 years ago, that you have to start making trade-offs of maybe I'm going to listen to X this week and Y next week. Um, I think production value matters now. It's not that it's just like you have to have the best equipment or something, but there is an element of, is your show creative? Is it strategic? Does it sound good? Like there's these kinds of things that the general level that people expect has grown, and it's higher than it used to be, and it is more important to really stand out. You still can find audiences in niche areas, but definitely as a whole, I think that's the case there. And then I'll also say the space itself, like from a production side, has gotten far noisier than it used to be. I think everything from people watching the appeal and the creativity and the boom happen in a lot of regards when we had this major sprint of kind of massive players picking up and buying different things. And then now we're kind of seeing this phase of layoffs. And It's noisier than it used to be, so it's a little harder to find a true signal, especially if you're a consumer wanting to go and make your own podcast. There's about 1,000 different people shouting random things at you at all times, so that gets a little difficult. But as a whole, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think there's plenty of space to grow. There's plenty of niches to tap into, and even at a really simple value of just like you got plenty of room to make something that you care about and that's worth listening to. So I'd answer that in a few different ways like that.
Yeah, I fully agree. And my true definition of saturated would be like probably Facebook ads, like that we've seen like very much saturated. I was a Facebook ads agency owner back in the days, and the cost per click went from 10 cents to like $5 in a very quick amount of time. So it went from super efficient in the green to being in the red quite quickly, which is one of the top reasons why I closed my first nootropic business back in the days. For the listening experience, me, I'm an odd duck. I listen my content, most of my content on YouTube. I mean, the switch to Apple Podcast to YouTube, and I think a lot of kids are doing the same switch, and not just kids, but like accomplished CEOs. Like YouTube is even my Netflix nowadays. I listen to a bunch of great documentaries that are higher quality than Netflix, ironically
Oh, for
enough,
sure.
in there. And I think, yeah, the full industry is shifting to audiovisual. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. Then, I mean, from a podcast agency perspective, like where can you be competitive? Is it being full service? Is it being focused on bringing guests, or having you start about like my new podcast agency, for example? Like how do you deal with that?
Yeah. Okay. Two solid questions. The first one, double back for me, the first one, because now my mind just went to the second one you asked.
Yeah, well, we're quantically connected, because yeah, it also got off my mind. But basically, I was talking about audiovisual. So
Oh,
is
yeah,
it
yeah,
is
yeah.
it going from audio to just audiovisual? Is that like true? You validate?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I literally just got off, like, not kidding, 5 minutes ago, I was talking to a prospect about this, and he was what I see it play out is there's some people, the audiovisual component is important, and it's important for different reasons. And the ways that you can approach it is that you either are video focused and you happen to be releasing audio, or you're audio focused and you happen to be releasing video. For me personally, the people that want to leverage a podcast are going to be much, much better off if they focus on audio first and make a video component from that. When you take video and try to turn it into a podcast, it's somewhat disconnected from the audience. If all of a sudden I picked up my water bottle and started talking to you about it, people on the visual side who are watching this will be able to see, but the people who are listening all of a sudden are slightly removed. And it starts to degrade that relationship and the intimacy of this platform, and specifically audio. It'd be similar to how you hear different things when you talk to someone on the phone versus when you have a Zoom conversation with them. There is that extra element. And so I'd say for us as an agency, we lean heavy into the audio side. And I'm fully aware that that might be counterintuitive to our current market, but I'm okay with that because I still think there's room to grow and expand and play on an audio medium. The other thing is that I enjoy personally, and our clients benefit from many of the things that are unique to an audio medium, the results and the perks of an audio medium than a visual. Plenty of people do the visual but they are distinct in terms of what works, what doesn't work. It's a different game almost. You care about something like even when you take very similar elements, a thumbnail and the appeal of a thumbnail on a YouTube video is going to play different than the appeal of cover art or episode specific cover art. And it's a different language. And so I'm not in a place currently that I'm equipped to say I'm an expert on the YouTube side, but I do feel very confident and comfortable on the audio side. And so that's kind of my approach with it, where I think there's plenty of space to go that way. The other thing that's worth noting is that you watch creators, you take like a popular one, like say Jay Klaus, for example, where he's taken more of a audio or more of the video approach. I think video has the potential for higher evergreen find a searchability, where traditionally speaking, when you look at podcast audio, like you drop an episode, you're going to have your natural spike right at the beginning, and it'll have a long tail listen still, but it's not the same as a long tail listen on a YouTube video, where that might grow over time in terms of people finding the video. The other last piece that I think I'll throw at you too and your listeners is depending on promotion. When you think about it in that lens, you have people that are already podcast listeners that you're trying to get to listen to your show, and you have people that are not already podcast listeners that you're trying to get to your show. If somebody's not a podcast listener, YouTube can be an amazing option because they're very familiar with this platform. And if they start paying attention to you on YouTube and go, oh, wow, this guy has a podcast, or this woman has a podcast, I think I might go check it out. And you find a listener that way who otherwise maybe never, ever would have been a podcast listener. And again, you take a big, huge name like a Rogan experienced a lot of that by when he was on primarily YouTube before he went exclusive with Spotify. And there's plenty of other examples too that cross over. So there's plenty of argument for both. I just know where we sit and play is more on that audio only side, or audio first side rather. And then in terms of the second part of your question of where to focus, I think that one's really interesting because the space has developed to a degree, and because I think there's a higher understanding of what a podcast is and what it can do than say there used to be. Even I'm thinking like 2015, 2016, 17, like in that range, where it was just like, wow, a podcast, exciting. Where now it's like, what is it going to do for me? Like, people are naturally a little more skeptical, which is good. And it forces us as the producers making them to really push harder and think and figure out what we can do from it. There's people who can make a living out of being straight consultant. There's people who can make a living out of full production like us. Like, we literally will help you from the very concept to the finish, where some clients come to us and they're just like, this is our idea, please make it. And other clients want to be involved in the process. There's people who are only editors, only producers. There's even part of me right now that I recently personally was contracted out to run a series of interviews for some people, where you very legitimately could become a full-time interviewer if you wanted to, if you were good at it. So I think there's a lot of room to play, and it's a matter of maybe don't hang your hat on one, especially if it's like super niche, like test it out first. But I do think that there's a lot more flexibility than there's used to be in terms of specializing further down than we could in the past. And I do think, to couple that too, that there's you're going to want to get clear. If you actually want to play in this space, if you want to stand out from the noise that I was talking about, you will need to differentiate in some capacity, that whether it's how you're doing the work, what kind of work you're doing, the vertical you're in, those types of factors, you're going to want to get clear of how you are different than everybody else, or why would somebody want to work with you compared to 1,000 other or 100 other people that they can.
How can we make video less boring? Because even Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman, I mean, this image of us talking, yes, it's good for trust, and yes, it's the evolution of images. It's a rapid sequence of images. That's what it is from a fundamental side, but how can we make it better? Like, I thought of sharing my screen at some point if my Mexican connection allows it. Jamie, like in Joe Rogan, right? I also thought of building an AI app that would convert our words into images or graphs or videos, or anything funny. Also in GIFs. What do you think about these ideas?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is going to be me speaking more as a consumer than a producer. But part of the reason that I don't like doing the video is because this is typically the option. And all of a sudden you have these variables where it's like, do we really want to associate our X $1 million brand with a couple talking heads that maybe have okay backgrounds, maybe don't? Like, there's so many variables. There's a huge difference between kind of my in between studio. Again, we'll go visual for a second. I just realized I have an Amazon box back there behind my cool chair that it looks kind of tacky now that I'm pointing it out. I'm like that kind of crap where I have a decent space. It's not like a crazy YouTuber gamer space or anything, but it's all right versus some people who are like recording out of a closet or just bootleg or whatever it is. So that does become problematic. And how do you want to focus on it? I know for what I like, if this was presented to me versus just the audio form, I'm going to opt audio because then I have mobility, like I have flexibility, like you said, to go and do other things. To me, the people to pay attention to are the creators that you enjoy, that you really like on YouTube. I mean, I don't know if there's a right answer. I think of a variety immediately of either straight creators that I really like the way that they produce and their style and their consistency with their kind of episode to episode or work to work, video to video, or the actual producers that are behind the scenes of other people and some of the advice they have. Those types of people, like just understanding your own interests, the interest of your audience, and trying to figure out ways of can I bridge that gap between my episode and what I like to see or what my audience likes to see. And if the answer is no, then maybe it's not worth doing yet. So that would be my take.
Good one. Me, I have this beautiful face to show. That's, I mean, visual. I take care of it quite a lot. So as a biohacker, the All In podcast with Jason Calacanis, Chamath Sachs, and Friedberg is very simple format. It's like three billionaires and one centi millionaire, and it's their face in a Zoom call. And it's one of the highest growth podcasts. I think it is mostly because of, yes, the concept of the billionaire millionaire thing, talking about normal issues. Plus Jason is great at promoting and getting more subscribers. So, but I think, yeah, it's pretty much laziness. I want to innovate on that front and show the listener something great. And yeah, also publish on other platforms. Talking about that, wanted to pitch an idea your way, because Jason Calacanis, that's what he did. He reached out to a couple of his billionaire friends and had them on a pod, which is something quite hard to do. You know, just to get one billionaire on your pod is hard. Now to reunite them in a room and record something weekly is something quite hard. They kind of had the political struggles at the beginning of the podcast, which was quite funny. You know, it was like the scene in the Batman of like, we only have one slot available, now fight for it. That was kind of it, you know. It was quite funny, and there's a lot of politics in the pod as well. So I think people kind of like that drama and the beef that happened in the pod sometimes. Anyway, my question and my pitch for you is, what if I would do something similar? Me as the Jason, the moderator, so not a billionaire yet. I reunite three billionaires on a pod, make it weekly. Do you think that could be a cool concept? Can I also apply that to debates? You know, take two famous folks and have them debate on a pod. What do you think about these concepts of using quite famous people and their brain and their audience to my benefit as a moderator, a deal maker, a middleman, the glue between the two?
Yeah, no, I hear you. They're actually, you immediately reminded me of, I'm going to look over here real quick in my other screen because I don't want to mess it up. Bear with me, people. It's called Creator Debates.
Yeah.
That one. Oops, sorry, I just pulled that up. Who's the host? Justin. So Justin from Creator Wizard started Creator Debates, and that has actually been pretty fun. I've listened to watched several of those episodes. And then even regarding our conversation, there was one between Jay and another friend of mine, Joe Casabona, and they were arguing whether it needed video or not. So if you are if listeners genuinely curious about that, it's fun to hear their argument back and forth. They both had valid points. So having this debate, leveraging other people, yeah, for sure. There's potential there. This $1 million thing, it's working for somebody. The thing I would throw back at you is why. It'd be go back to your goals. And this is something that even from a practical standpoint for me, of any client who comes through the door, the first thing I'm doing is, what is your goal? and why a podcast. Like if they can't convince me that that's a good idea, of whatever they're striving for is a good idea, and that specifically a podcast is the right solution to that idea, then we don't have anything to go off of. And so it's like, could you do these things? For sure. We could do whatever the frick we wanted, but does it make sense for what I'm trying to accomplish?
Right. Audience, knowledge. Billionaires, they check a lot of boxes, you know. It's consider it to be a very hard and humbling feat most of the time to get at this top, you know, whatever like anti-capitalist folks say. So
Yeah.
you leverage their brain and their audience, their knowledge. And but yeah, it's a super hard feat to have these folks, you know, especially if you're a stranger to them. Jason already had connections with them. His first interview with David Sachs was in the PayPal Mafia days, so like 20 years ago. I have tons of other things to pitch you, but yeah, as we discussed, I have a hard stop. I'm actually late to my next interview, but I'd love to do a round two to like talk about like specific concepts. It was very insightful. Thank you for this, Jeff. Where
Absolutely.
can people find out more about you?
Yeah, if you want to find out, I'll break the rules. I'm going to give you two. If you want to find out about my company, comealivecreative.com is the easiest place. If you want to talk to me, LinkedIn is probably the place that I'm most active on currently nowadays. So just Jeff Large on LinkedIn.